as we sit here today, the current administration just revoked the restriction that barred Americans to invest in a digital asset ETPs in their 401ks or products like that. So that's going to be a big, I would call it an institutional well. If you think of wells like,
Yes.
liquidity wells or oil wells in Texas, there's these big pools and small pools, and we just unlocked a major pool here. I think it's most estimates run around $9 trillion of a new well that's being tapped. Perhaps maybe you can walk us through how the Canadian system works. I know that you all have pensions. What's the latest, coming from that cohort? Are there any hesitations that you're hearing from asset allocators in that space? And how do you think that's going to kind of play out in the next 3 to 6 months to over a year?
100%. So we've been very involved in all of the above. So the Canadian system, we have an RRSP, which is a bit like your 401k, and a tax-free savings account, which is a little bit more like your Roth IRA. Okay. Our products qualify for both. So that was a big advantage of wrapping things in an ETF, is it made it tax efficient for growth, for retail and for wealth. So what we saw when we first launched, 4 years ago, was you have different permissions. Let's call it the wealth channels, okay, which in Canada is 85% controlled by the banks. So the big five have fully vertically integrated, banks and wealth channels as well. There are a few large independent asset managers and a few large wealth managers, but primarily the banks control all of that. And so, if the client was requesting access to digital, some managers some advisors had the right to invest if it came from the client, right? Most of them had no discretionary rights, and some had full-on blockage. In other words, even if the client asked for it, no bueno.
Oh,
You
wow.
got you got to go. You got to go somewhere else. Open up.
Yeah.
Funny enough, though, the bank's direct investor platforms allowed it. So basically, if you were with a bank and you weren't allowed to advise your client, you could say, go open a self-directed account at the same bank and go buy it there.